Hello, and welcome to this Skill Builder session on pivot tables. Today we will discuss the use of pivot tables in working with datasets with multiple data points, and the ways that we can use the interactivity of these tables, sometimes in place of formulas, to identify trends in our data and extract relevant information for further analysis. We will also discuss presenting the data, as well as adding calculated fields to extract further information. In essence, pivot tables are flexible and interactive tables which allow you to present and work with your data, adding filters and changing variables quickly to assess that data from multiple angles. Here on Excel, we have a sample dataset of a music promoter. This includes relevant information about the artists booked over 14 separate evening gigs. There are a wide range of artists booked across 7 different genres: UK hip-hop, jazz, weightless, folk, drum and bass, rock, and prog. Because the promoter is new to this town, and their last town was only interested in watching mime, they're inexperienced in booking anything other than this, let alone from such varied genres. As such, they're trying to gather data that might help them to determine the most effective bookings. The table shows us the name of the artist, the genre, the number of tickets sold for the gig, the price of the ticket, the total ticket revenue, i.e. the price of the ticket times the number of tickets sold, and finally the overheads, i.e. the cost of booking the artist and the fee for the venue. What the promoter would like to know from this data is the following: where the promoter has altered ticket prices throughout the season based on genre demand, what has the effect been on ticket sales? And secondly, which genres have made the promoter the greatest profit? We could insert a number of equations to do this, but a pivot table will enable us to engage with these multiple questions interactively and cleanly in terms of their presentation. So to insert a pivot table, we highlight the data we wish to include, like so. Then we click Insert on the top ribbon on Excel, and then on the left hand side we have a couple of pivot table options. You can select recommended pivot tables, bring up the following dialog box. In fact, this may be useful in a number of scenarios. But for this tutorial, we're instead going to select pivot table here in the top half of that box. A dialog box will appear asking us to define the table or range. We've already done this through highlighting the box in the main Excel sheet, and where we want the pivot table to be placed. For ease of viewing here, we are going to select New Worksheet, which is already selected for us. We will then ignore this bottom option of analysing multiple tables and adding data to the data model. We'll do that for now, and we will click OK. As we can see, we've had a new pivot table added on a new sheet on our Excel workbook. We're instructed to choose fields from the pivot table field list, and that's on the right here. The menu on the right hand side of our screen includes the titles from the table of our original data. We can drag and drop any of these into one of the 4 boxes below. Rows and columns, unsurprisingly, determine the rows and columns of our table, whilst values will give us the values of the quantities within that table. Filters will give us the ability to further define the values that we wish to see. Okay, so let's go about using pivot tables to answer our first question. Where the promoter has altered ticket prices throughout the season based on genre demand, what is the sweet spot in terms of price for each genre? So the first thing we want to do is to consider the data we're going to need. We're going to need to know the number of tickets sold. We're going to need to know the price of the tickets. And we're going to need to know the genre. As the question revolves around what happens to price adjustments in different genres, genre is going to be one of the ways we wish to divide and view our data. As such, we're going to drag genre into the rows area below, although we could also add it into columns if we wish to view it that way. Our genres now appear as row headers in our table. We still need to add, however, tickets sold and ticket prices. We wish to compare the prices too, so this should be our columns. As you can now see, once we insert the number of tickets sold into the values area, we should be given information for how many tickets were sold for each genre at each price point. As such, if we do this now, we can see this very data before us. Rows on the left, prices on the right, and then the number of tickets sold within each genre. Whilst this is admittedly a very small data set, this data may start to give the promoter an idea of where to price tickets for given nights in order to maximise attendance. As we can see, for example, here, £30 might be a little bit too much for a rock night, but people seemed quite happy to pay a little bit more for jazz. And now to our second question. Which genres have made the promoter the greatest profit? The first thing we want to do to be able to compare the genres is to have that as either a column or row, i.e. as something which will be measured against the other. Before we do this though, we need to clear our existing table. We can click these little arrows here to remove the field. Let's do that for all of these. So what we want to do is to be able to compare the genres and have those as either a column or a row. Let's put them back into rows. Then, because we want to see the value of the ticket revenue, we will drag the total ticket revenue into the values area. As we can see, we now have the genres and the amount of money that each genre made. In order to calculate the profit, however, we obviously need to deduct the overheads from the total revenue. As such, we also want to create a column of the value of the overheads per genre. So we're going to drag that into values. Now we can see the genre, the total revenue from that genre, and the total overheads for that genre across the whole season, and the grand total for both beneath. Now though, we do have a potential issue. We don't have existing data which works out the difference between the revenue and the overheads. As such, we're going to have to add a new field. We can do this by clicking anywhere on our table to select it, by then going to Pivot Table Analyze at the top here, clicking Fields, Items and Sets, and then clicking Calculated Field. Once the Insert Calculated Field dialog box has popped up, we can insert a formula, similar to how we would in one of our cells in a standard Excel spreadsheet. We know here that we want to subtract overheads from total revenue. So after picking a new name for our field, we're going to call it here Profit Loss. We can click the Insert Field button to select the relevant fields, separating them with a minus. So we can delete what's currently in the box, put equals, and then we're going to do total ticket revenue, insert field, minus overheads, insert field. Once we've done this, we can click OK and we'll see that our new field is added on the right in column D as an additional value. So now our promoter can see that people in this town like to spend money on drum and bass, they like to spend money on weightless. However, if the promoter keeps putting on lots of prog and jazz gigs, they might find themselves in a little bit more financial difficulty. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at learning@kent.ac.uk and we can organise a one-to-one meeting or advise you of some workshops that might be able to meet any academic questions you may have. Thank you very much.